Let's take this conversation now to our political contributors, former Democratic Senators Heidi Heitkamp from North Dakota, where it's a nice -4 this morning, and former Trump administration official Sarah Isgur. I am so glad you are inside and keeping warm. I don't know how you're braving these elements. It reminds me of living in Green Bay, Wisconsin, Heidi.
Well, listen, this is a great day for some iced coffee. Only the brave go north. And so we're pretty proud of how hardy we are here.
Oh, I know you are. It's a soup day, a big chicken soup day. All right, Heidi. You actually signed on to an op-ed in support of changing Senate rules to allow Democrats to pass this bill with a simple majority of 51 votes. What you actually wrote, and this is what you said, it's time for rules reform that will restore a functional United States Senate. Our democracy cannot wait another day. Just talk to us for a moment here. What does that reform look like to you? Lay it out for us.
Well, I think it definitely means that we have to have a talking filibuster. This idea that you can kind of secretly slip a note and say, oh, I want to filibuster this, and therefore the Senate now is stopped from considering any kind of legislation. It has to end. The other thing is, it's interesting because people say, oh, this would end democracy as we know it. The Senate would be like a different place. We've done this before. We've created exceptions for important pieces of legislation, whether it's trade promotion authority, whether it's budget reconciliation, which is why everything gets crammed in budget reconciliation and the public doesn't participate. You know, it's interesting because a lot of people who will hang their hat permanently on the filibuster as it currently exists. And if you read all of the letter, we did not say the filibuster should be completely eliminated. We said it needed to be reformed. Not one state that is passing these restrictions that we've been talking about has a filibuster in their Senate. They all have majority rule. And so for important pieces of legislation, whether it's war powers, for which there's an exception, whether it's trade promotion authority, emergency powers, there are important things that need to get done or at least need to be debated. And I think that's the important stuff, is that none of this even gets debated, and members hide behind this silent filibuster. Make them come to the floor and explain why they oppose the legislation. Let's debate things again in the Senate.
All right, Sarah, as you heard Heidi say, that exceptions have been created before, but Republicans are simply calling this bill a federal takeover of elections. Do you agree?
Well, I want to agree with Senator Heitkamp a little here, because both sides have wanted to get rid of the filibuster when they're in power, and then both sides have wanted to keep the filibuster when they're not in power. And she's right. There have been all these exceptions carved out. First, Democrats carved out exceptions for lower court nominees in the Obama administration. Then Republicans carved out an exception for Supreme Court nominees during the Trump administration. It's interesting when you look back at the history of the filibuster. There used to be a talking filibuster, as she said, where you can't just raise your hand and say, I filibuster, and then go home and have a nice sleep. You actually have to stay there and, like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, stand up and talk. The reason they got rid of that, interestingly, was the majority wanted to get rid of the talking filibuster because it meant that the time in the Senate was used with a whole bunch of people talking for 20+ hours instead of being able to move on to other work. So it would be interesting, even if Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer got his way and they went back to a talking filibuster. I question how long that will last, because it's actually not in Schumer's interest to have the Senate floor taken up with Republicans talking. As for this bill specifically, Republicans' objection to it tends to be that it would federalize elections, setting one set of rules instead of allowing states to set 50 different sets of rules. So, for instance, New York has fewer days of early voting than Georgia does, even after the new Georgia law. Same with Delaware. Different, stricter rules in New York than Georgia on other things as well. But I do think there are two misconceptions on the Republican side, and the Democratic side for that matter. One is that somehow low turnout helps Republicans. Very little evidence for that in any of the states. Again, we have 50 states to look at in some of this. Second, that actually these tactics over voter suppression work. There's very little evidence that any voter ID laws, for instance, actually detract people from voting. And so when Democrats compare this to Jim Crow, one progressive comedian called it civil rights cosplay. It simply is not Jim Crow, and to call it that is insulting, frankly, to everything that the civil rights movement went through. This isn't that, and it hasn't shown any actual effect on voter turnout. We've had the highest voter turnout in history in the last election, and so maybe both sides need to take a second and think about what they're actually fighting over.
Well, what's become a household word is filibuster. Now we're talking about a talking filibuster. How many times can we add words to the word filibuster? Heidi, also two names that have become household names, Manchin and Sinema, those two Democratic senators still standing in the way of changing the filibuster rules to pass this bill. Why do you think they just feel so strongly at this moment in time about not breaking precedent?
I think that they truly want the Senate to work, and they believe that this will, in fact, further alienate any kind of bipartisan effort to pass legislation. People who want to impugn motivation on them, can we just take them at face value when they say they're deeply concerned about the functioning of the Senate and they see the filibuster a different way? And so, Joe Manchin is one of my best friends. I appreciate and understand what he's saying. But the real tragedy here is that when you look at the explosion of when the filibuster first got its attention, it was during the time that we were trying to pass the Civil Rights Acts. And Southern Democrats basically used this procedural measure to stop civil rights from moving forward. We're seeing a little bit of a repeat. And I want to just respond a little bit to Sarah and just say, I agree with her that we really need to have a debate on what this means. But there also is a big rumor that the Republicans don't want to debate this because even their own pollster is telling them that these measures in the John Lewis Act and in the Voter Rights Acts are in fact popular, and people want them voted on and they want them passed. And so this is subterfuge on the Republicans' part. But for my two colleagues, Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, I take them at face value. I think they honestly believe that this will be disastrous to the functioning of the Senate.
Well, I'll tell you what, ladies, we will keep the discussion going. Sarah, Heidi, appreciate you both so much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.